my channel. So today's video is going to be something that was requested of me. I had a subscriber ask me to go over how I became an RT student. Like, I asked her if she wanted to know anything specific, and she just said everything. So I'm gonna start from the beginning all the way up until now. So before I get started, if you don't know who I am, hi, my name is Erin. I am a first-time mom to a toddler named William. He'll be 2 in April. And I am also about to start my 3rd semester of respiratory therapy school. So if you like mom and school content, definitely hit that subscribe button. I try to post as often as I can whenever school's going on because it's so busy. But yeah, I would love it if you join my little family, and let's just go ahead and get started. So I just want to start off by saying that this is just my experience. Like, every school is different. Every program is different. Every person's, availability and scheduling is different. So don't base what I did and what I have to do to what you have to do or what you're going to do. Like, don't take the classes that I took when I took them if you don't need to, or if you don't feel like you're ready. Definitely talk to a counselor or advisor at your school to see what's right for you and see how you need to be scheduled, because like I said, every school is different, every program is different. You may need something that I didn't need, or I may need something that you didn't need. Use what I say as kind of like an insight and not so much as you need to do this. I'm sitting on the floor by my toddler's high chair and I just touched something sticky. I don't know what it is. So I've got a reference here on my phone, just like a list of things to go over. That way I don't leave anything out. I don't want to leave anything out or have to go back because I forgot and just remembered to add something, which I may still do that anyway. But so if you see me looking down, this is what I'm looking at. Okay, so to start out, let's go back, way back to 2006, whenever I started middle school. Yes, baby. It started way back then. I hated school. I hated it so much. It wasn't necessarily like the people there at that point in time or my teachers. I just hated being there. Like, I hated the entire atmosphere of just school in general. And that lasted all the way up until I graduated high school. I was really bad at math. I kind of just, excuse my language, but I half-assed everything just so that I would pass. I didn't really do that good. It wasn't until my senior year of high school where I actually put forth some effort into doing my work. I made straight A's only on my senior year. The rest of the time I made like B's and C's and a D here and there. So yeah, I hated school. I didn't take advantage of like any dual enrollment classes or anything. I didn't really study for my ACT. I only got a 17 on the ACT because I just didn't care. I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to start working right out of high school. I had no interest in school, continuing school at all, because I hated middle school and high school so much. I don't remember why exactly I hated high school, if it was just me having to get up and go somewhere and not be at home, because I was very introverted and I'm still a very introverted person. But high school, I hated high school so, it was the absolute worst. I got bullied all the time. I went to like 3 different high schools because they were all just terrible. And it was just awful. I didn't want to continue. I thought college would be the same way. So after I graduated, I said deuces and started working. And that's when I started working at the pet store. If you've watched any of my previous vlogs, you know that a pet store was my first job. And I still kind of work there on and off, but that was what I started doing in fall of 2013 after I graduated in the spring of 2013. So fast forward a few years to 2017 when I was working at a vet clinic with a friend of mine, and she decided that she wanted to go back to school. She had lost her mother a few years before, and her mom was a surgical tech, and she wanted to go to the local community college to do that. She wanted to be what her mom was. And me and her are the same exact age. So back in 2017, we were like, oh gosh, how old were we? So we had just turned 22, or about to turn 22 in the fall of 2017. So we got a pretty late start, or at least in my opinion we did, just because, you know, you imagine going to college right out of high school, then graduating by the time you're 22, not doing it really late and getting out whenever you're almost 30. Like I just turned 27 in November, and I feel like I got a really late start and I regret it. But I mean, I can't change anything. I'm happy with where I'm at, but back to where I was. So I hadn't really, until that point, given any thought about going to college at all. I still really hated school, and after she had mentioned that, I started thinking, you know, I'm sick of living paycheck to paycheck. I hate not having any extra money after my bills are paid, and you know, Matt and I want to buy a house soon because at the time we were living with his mother. I just started thinking, you know, researching and looking up, because I didn't even consider college an option at that point. I'm not entirely sure why, but I didn't. And so I went on the college's website and was looking at their surgical tech program, and I liked it, and she and I went and applied and started in fall of 2017. Now, my grades in high school, like I said, they sucked. And since I only made a 17 on my ACT, there was, I guess the way the ACT is graded, they have like different points for different subjects like math, English, science, and history, I think. I don't remember. And then I guess it's all like weighted off of how you score on those different subjects. So English, I did really well in. I've always done well in English. But math I did pretty bad in. I think I needed to make like an 18 in that section, and I made a 17. So my counselor, or the lady that I was talking to, the advisor, she told me that I would need to take like a remedial math that semester because I needed to at least score an 18 on the ACT in the math portion to test into or out of that remedial math. And that remedial math I needed to be able to test out of to be able to go on to and apply to the surgical tech program. So I signed up for that math, and then I also took medical terminology and then microbiology lecture and lab. Now, I loved microbiology. That, to this day, is my favorite class that I've ever taken. Like I love learning about little microbes and, you know, little funguses or fungi. And I loved, you know, growing them in lab and like swabbing everything and looking at them under the microscope. Like that was so much fun. So I put forth most of my effort into those classes, and I kind of put math and medical terminology kind of on the back burner, mainly just because medical terminology was really easy, and math, I wasn't very confident in math anyway, and I was really upset that I had to take it. And Matt and I were looking for a house to buy, and you know, so I was busy with working and microbiology and looking for a house, and I just kind of put those two classes on the back burner. And we ended up buying this house at the end of the semester, and we've lived here since then. Obviously, I guess I didn't really need to say that. But I passed microbiology lecture with an A, and then the lab I passed with a B. But in medical terminology, I only passed with a C, and then math, I made an F in that class. So that really hurt my GPA. I don't know exactly what my GPA was at the end of each semester. I haven't looked. I guess I should have, but I'll put my GPA at the end of each semester like on the screen right here so that you can see after I get done talking about each semester. And then if I can find it, if it's on there after each semester, I'll also put my cumulative GPA after after so that you can see what my GPA is, you know, leading up to respiratory school. So after failing that class, I was really discouraged, but I did go talk to another counselor whenever I went to apply for more classes to take in the spring semester, and she told me that I didn't even have to take the math. Like, I tested into the math, I don't have to test out of the math. So the initial advisor told me wrong. She said as long as you test into the class, you don't have to take it and test out of the class to be able to apply to be a surgical tech. I hope I'm saying this to where it makes sense. I don't really know how else to say it, but if you have any questions on anything, just ask me in the comments. I'll answer as best as I can. So I was really relieved that I didn't have to retake that math, and I went ahead and scheduled my spring 2018 classes. I took Intro to Anatomy and Physiology, lecture and lab, dosage calculations, ethics, and healthcare systems and safety. Intro to Anatomy and Physiology was kind of just like a basic overview. It doesn't really go in deep like Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2 does. So it was just kind of like a basic overview of it. I passed the lecture and the lab with B's. I passed my dosage calculation class with a B, and then ethics and healthcare systems and safety I had A's in. So I took that entire summer off because I just wanted to, and I didn't go back until fall of 2018, and I had pharmacology and pathophysiology to take. Those were the only 2 classes that I had left, and since those were the only 2 classes that I had left, I wanted to sign up for an ECG class as well, because around here you can take ECG class as a surgical tech student, and then being able to read like an ECG in the field would get you higher pay because you knew how to do that. So yeah, of course I wanted to do that, so I signed up to take that class as well. But in the midst of signing up for those classes, the counselor I was talking to asked me why I wanted to be a surgical tech, and I told her because my friend was doing it and it looked interesting. I find surgery interesting. I find the human body interesting. I love watching videos of surgery. I find that kind of stuff really interesting, and I swear if I had done things right, I would be a surgeon right now. Like, I find the human body fascinating. I don't know, I really think I like pathology. I'd probably be a pathologist and doing autopsies. I think I would do that. So after I explained all that to her, she told me the reason that she asked was because she was looking at my GPA and all of the classes I've taken, and she said that my GPA and my grades were way too good not to do something more challenging, and she suggested either medical lab technologist or respiratory therapy. And I had never heard of respiratory therapy, like ever. Like, that's the first time I had ever heard of that. Like, I had no idea what it was. So I took the afternoon to think about it, because that would mean I would have to completely start over. Well, not completely. I mean, I only had 2 or 3 classes left, and then I could apply to the surgical tech program. But if I changed my major and went with something else, I would have some of the prereqs already under my belt, like microbiology and medical terminology. Like, I would have those done, but I would also have to take several more classes. I would have to spend longer in school, and it was just something that I really had to think about. But I ended up going home and taking the night to think about it. I talked to Matt about it. I talked to friends about it. I looked up the curriculum and the program on the school's website, and I looked up the career online and YouTube videos and employment statistics and salaries and just everything. Like, I went into so much more detail looking at this than I did whenever I went to sign up to be a surgical tech. Like, I wanted to find something to convince myself not to switch, but I couldn't. Like, I loved everything about it. I loved being autonomous and being able to do my, not necessarily do my own thing, but be able to walk around the hospital and take care of patients and, you know, not have to stand in one spot for 6, 7, 8 hours at a time. I could be, you know, on this floor doing neonates one day, and then this floor doing ICU patients another day, and then on this floor taking care of just regular patients another day. Like, it's just, everything about it appealed to me. And so the next day I went to the counselor's office and I switched my major to respiratory therapy. My school offers the Associate's Respiratory Therapy degree. So because it's only a 2-year college, there is a college in my local area that offers a bachelor program. I didn't want to do that because I had already, you know, established like rapport at the college that I was at, and I didn't want to have to stay in for longer than I had to, so I didn't go the bachelor route. Now I kind of wish I did, but there is a bridge program that I can enroll in the future if I do decide to do that. I might do that, but I've kind of got senioritis and I'm kind of done with being in school, so I may not do that. So after I switched, one of the things I talked to my counselor about whenever I was signing up for those classes was that I sucked at the math class that I had to take. So for respiratory therapy, I had to test out of the remedial math class that, you know, I had to take, and I had to test out of a college algebra class. So that was, you know, remedial math, and then the next step up, which was college algebra, which was math 101 or math 102. In my school, the difference between 101 and 102 is that, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. They teach the same material. It's a little bit more in depth, but for 102, that credit will transfer if you decide you want to go to a 4-year university, whereas 101 does not. So I decided that just in case I did want to transfer to a 4-year college in the future, I would take 102. So she suggested that I take a hard class with an easy class. Since I had to retake that remedial math again, and I struggled with it the first time, she said that I should take a really easy class with it, one that I wouldn't have any problem with. So for the fall of 2018, I took my remedial math and then I took English 101. Now, I had a different teacher for that math class and she taught it so much better than the teacher before, and I passed that class with a B. I also passed English with an A, so I was really, really happy, and I knew that I wanted to take that teacher again for the higher level math because I understood it so much more whenever she was explaining it. So for spring of 2019, I took English 102, that college algebra 102, developmental psychology, and anatomy and physiology 1 lecture and lab. So a curveball was thrown at me early on in that semester. I found out I was pregnant, and that kind of, I don't know, it took a toll on me, mainly because of my mood and my attention span and my tiredness. Like, I struggled mainly because I was just so tired, and like I couldn't focus really well, and I had, you know, extra doctor's appointments and stuff, so that took away from study time, and I was still working, so I struggled quite a bit that semester. I ended up making a D in math, so I failed that class. I made an A in developmental psychology, I made a B in anatomy lecture and lab, and then I made an A in English 102. So really my biggest struggles for that semester was anatomy lecture and math. Those were the ones that I really, really struggled with, but I ended up passing anatomy and not doing so great in math. So because I was pregnant and I was due in April, and that was around the time that finals would start, and I didn't want to have to take off around finals to give birth, so I decided to take that whole spring semester off. And it was a really good thing I did, because that's whenever COVID started and school shut down anyway and went to completely online. So I took that spring semester off and that summer and decided that I would try again in the fall of 2020. Classes were still online at that time, and Will was still pretty young. He was like 4 or 5 months old whenever the semester started, and I was still kind of sleep deprived because at that time he was still waking up throughout the night to eat, and you know, I was going through postpartum depression and I wasn't medicated at that time, so I had a lot of stuff, you know, going on in my personal life that made school hard, but I still tried. So for that fall semester, I signed up for the last 4 classes that I needed before I could apply to the respiratory therapy program. I signed up for Math 102 again, but I had to take it with a different teacher because the teacher that I liked wasn't available online, or her classes were full. One of the two, I can't remember which one. But the teacher I liked. I really liked her, so that's good. I signed up for Anatomy and Physiology 2 lecture and lab, and I took a Western Civ class. That was like an extra class that I had to take, like an elective, and I like history, so I took that. So I really struggled this semester, like really bad. It doesn't help that it was all online and I was pretty much having to teach myself, but anatomy lecture absolutely killed me. Like, I failed every single one of her tests. The entire class pretty much failed all of her tests. The material was so hard. Her teaching was awful. It was just the worst experience with any kind of class I've ever taken at all. And I really struggled with it. Math I was doing okay in. I mean, I wasn't doing great. I had like a high C. And then Western Civ, I was doing great. I had an A. I passed that class with an A. That was an 8-week class, so it was only half of the semester. So after I passed that class with an A, I didn't really have to worry about that anymore, so I could put more focus on anatomy. But I was still failing. So after, I think it was like my 9th or 10th week, I talked to Matt and I was like, look, I still have a whole nother semester before I can apply to this program. These are the only 3 classes I have to take, and I'm really thinking about dropping them now and then just retaking them next spring whenever class is back in session on campus. So I dropped all 3 of those classes, picked them back up in the spring of 2021. So the spring of 2021, obviously, I took Anatomy and Physiology 2 lecture and lab, and instead of trying Math 102 again, I decided just to do Math 101 instead. The same teacher that I had for the online class in math, I took her in person, and then woe is me, the only available instructor for Anatomy and Physiology 2 lecture was that awful teacher that I had online. The class wasn't online, thankfully, but at least it was in person. And I really think that that was my only saving grace, because I struggled so hard in her class. Our class started out with like 30 students. And then there were only 4 of us that took a final. And I think me and one other girl out of the 4 of us were the only 2 that passed the final. And let me tell you, I made just above what I needed to make in order to pass the class. Like, that was the hardest C I have ever worked for. Like, I scrambled and clawed my way to victory in that class. I'm just thankful I passed it. I mean, I ended up getting to know the teacher because I went to her with, you know, study tips and stuff, so that helped a little bit. And she was actually very sweet. We got pretty close, but just her as a person is great, but her as a teacher, ooh, it was bad. So I passed the Math 101 with a B. I passed Anatomy Lecture with a C, and then Anatomy Lab with a C too, I think. A C or a B. I don't remember which one. I think it was a C though. But in my defense, if it's the same class I'm thinking about, I passed her class with a 79.5, and she wouldn't round it up to an 80. So I was this close. This close. And I was really mad. But by this time, and I do remember what my GPA was at this time. My GPA at this time was a 2.9. Or was it? I'll put it on the screen. So the minimum GPA for my school to apply to the respiratory therapy program is a 2.5. So I had surpassed that. And also, since I worked at a vet clinic, I had some medical experience, so I put that on my application. And applications were due, I think, mid-April, and I turned my application in on time. And then there was an applicant meeting that we had to go to at the beginning of May so that we could go and meet the instructors, everybody who applied. We sat in the auditorium, we watched a video on respiratory therapy and what it really was. We talked about the NBRC, we talked about, you know, a little bit more in-depth things about what the curriculum was like and how they told us that we couldn't really work while we were doing it because it would just be really time consuming. And it was just kind of a meeting like that where they told us their expectations and we could ask them questions of things, you know, anything that we had. And then after that, after the applicant meeting, I guess is whenever they looked over everybody's applications and looked at their grades, and then we just kind of waited for an email to see if we were invited to the interviews. So I don't remember when the interview process took place, but you had to have an interview in order to get into the program, I guess, just to see what your personality is like, because a person can look good on paper, but if their personality is crap, then, you know, it's just not good. So they had me in a group with 3 other girls in the interview room, and it was us 4 and all of our professors. They were all asking us questions, and it was very nerve-wracking, but the 4 of us afterwards, we exchanged numbers and got in a group text, and then we would kind of chit chat back and forth until we found out what the results of the interview was. Now, being the worrywart that I am, I had a backup plan just in case. At the same time that I applied for the RT program, I also applied for the surgical tech program, because even though I still had those 2 to 3 classes to do, it was an option to be able to do those in the first semester of surgical tech classes. So I could get in without having those already done and just take them while I was taking my first semester classes. So I applied to the surgical tech program just in case I didn't get into the RT program. And I was just kind of waiting to see where I ended up. So I got a phone call actually after the interview from the surgical tech program director, and he invited me over the phone to the orientation for surgical tech. He told me the day, he told me the time, and I told him I would be there because I hadn't heard from the RT people yet, so I didn't know whether or not I had got in. So I told him I would be there, and a few days later we actually got an email that all 4 of us that were in the interview together, we all got accepted. And we were all so happy, we were so excited. I was crying. I was at my mom's house with Will whenever I found it out, and my adrenaline was so high, my heart was racing, I was so happy. I immediately went from my mom's house to the scrub store to get maroon scrubs because that was the dress code. And I got, you know, all kinds of school supplies. I was over the moon. I was so excited. So I ended up emailing the director of the surgical tech program and told him that I apologize, but I got accepted into a different program, and I told him thank you for the opportunity for considering me for the surgical tech program. So a few weeks later, I don't remember the day, my first semester of respiratory therapy school started. The very first summer semester was summer 2021, and we were going on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we were taking respiratory anatomy and physiology. Now, I forgot to mention that there was also one more class that I had to take to be a respiratory therapist, and that was elemental physics, which is just an introductory physics class. That was another class that I had the option to take during the first semester of RT school, just like the classes for surgical tech school. I could take this one during my first semester, and I chose to do that mainly because you had to have 6 total semester hours in order to qualify for financial aid, and I needed the aid. I still need the aid, really. So I took the respiratory anatomy and physiology and elemental physics for that first summer 8-week semester. I passed both classes with a B, and I was really happy. Like, the physics class wasn't really that hard. The math was kind of hard, but that anatomy class was tough, mainly just because it wasn't just like anatomy. It was about like pressure gradients and oxygen concentrations, and I mean, it was a lot. We struggled, but we did it. Like, looking back, it really wasn't that bad. I think if I was taking it alone, it wouldn't have been so bad, but we struggled with it, but it was very doable. I'm very thankful that I passed it with a B. So this past semester, my second semester, fall 2021, was an incredibly difficult semester. I took respiratory care fundamentals, lecture and lab, pharmacology, pulmonary disease, and then I had a class called respiratory care seminar. I'm not entirely sure like what exactly like the class was supposed to be, but the first half of the semester it was about renal diseases and heart diseases, and then the second half of the semester was ECG. So I guess they just didn't know what to call it, but there it was. So the first 18 weeks of that semester, I almost quit. It was hard. It was hard. I struggled. I was depressed. I thought that I couldn't do it. And it wasn't, I'm not gonna say it wasn't just me and it was all of my classmates, but damn near all of us were just struggling with this fundamentals class. And I talked about it in a vlog previously. It was so difficult, mainly just because the tests were worded really hard. Like, it was a lot of critical thinking, and they were worded like NBRC questions are worded, because the professor that teaches that class writes NBRC test questions. So he's kind of up there in the respiratory community, you know. But a big thing that was really hard was that a lot of those questions were scenarios with patients that you had to apply what you had just learned, and it was hard to apply that kind of thing without having the experience to be able to compare it to, you know. Like, it would ask us questions about hospital settings, and we had never been in a hospital setting, or at least I haven't. So thinking about an answer to a critical thinking question like that was really difficult, and I struggled so hard in that class. The lab was really fun because we had lecture on Monday and Wednesday from 9 to 4, and then you had a lab on Thursday afternoon or Friday morning from either 9 to 12 or 1 to 4, and it was kind of like where you put your hands on the stuff So like we actually got to play with the masks and play with the nebulizers and play with the CPAP and BiPAP and, you know, mess with the oxygen tank. So you got to learn about it in the first part of the week, and then you actually got to touch it and play with it and actually physically see it and do it at the end of the week. But every Monday, every stinking Monday morning, we had a test in that class. And those tests were so hard, like I cannot tell you enough how difficult. And I'm not saying this to discourage anybody, I'm really not. I don't know how other programs are. I just know for me and for who my professor was and how he writes his test questions, it was hard. But I ended up passing the class with a C. And I am proud of that C. I'm very proud of that C. My pharmacology class, I struggled with that quite a bit. I really thought that that class was going to take me out. I really struggled with that class. And it wasn't, you know, that the teacher taught the things difficult. Like, I feel like I was the only one struggling with that class as hard as I was, because the different drugs had so many different names and, you know, all the different action potentials and drug names and classifications. It was hard not to get them confused. I had to change up my way of studying a few times in that class, but I passed it with a B. Super excited. Did not see that coming at all. I really thought that that class was just gonna boot scoot and boogie me out of there, like I really did. Pulmonary disease, I passed that class with a B. I actually scored a 79.8 at the end of the semester, but she was amazing and bumped me up to an 80, so I passed the class with a B. Not like my anatomy 2 teacher, just that's in the past, I need to let it go. But I'm very thankful that she did bump me up. And then for my respiratory care seminar class, I passed that with a high C. And also last semester, the fall semester, was the first semester of clinical rotations. Like I said, the fundamentals class was the first 8 weeks, and then clinical rotations was that second 8 weeks. So we had clinical rotations for 2 days a week for 4 weeks at one hospital, and then 2 days a week for 4 weeks at a second hospital. I went to one hospital in East Texas since I'm close to the border, and then another hospital here locally for the second half. And for the rotations for each hospital, we had like a checklist of things that we had to do, and then we had patient sheets that we had to fill out, like pick a patient for that week and fill out why they're there, what their chief complaint was, their age, their height, their weight, you know, nothing personal. We didn't tell their name or their race or anything like that, anything that was identifiable, of course. But we put like what they were diagnosed with, what their treatment options were, what medications they were on, you know, things like that. So out of all of those, and we also had a case study. So we had to pick a patient and do like a big project on them at the end of each, you know, 4 weeks. So half of the class presented the first 4 weeks, and then the other half of the class presented the last 4 weeks. So I was one of the ones where I presented on the first 4 weeks, so I chose my patient from East Texas, and I was actually the very first person to go because my anxiety was so bad. When she asked if anybody wanted to volunteer to go, my hand just shot up. I was like, please pick me, I want to get over with. But I did really good, and I ended up passing like the clinical part of the semester with an A. So we had the entire month of December off. We actually go back on Monday, which is January 10th. And I'm really excited, but I'm also really nervous because the first 6 weeks of this spring semester is going to be like the first 8 weeks of last semester. We're going to learn critical care about ventilators and taking care of ICU patients, and I hear that this class is like fundamentals but like 3 times harder. So I am going to talk about this semester and then the summer semester. Even though I haven't done those yet, I'm still going to tell you what classes those semesters are going to consist of and when I'm probably expected to graduate. So the spring semester, like I said, I'm taking critical care. That's a lecture and a lab. That's going to be on Mondays and Wednesdays from 9 to 4 is the lecture, and then again Thursday afternoons or Friday mornings is going to be the lab. We're also going to take a neonatal and pediatric class, an ethics class, and then a pulmonary function test class. And then after the first 6 weeks is over, that's whenever we start our second clinical rotation part of that semester. We're going to go to 2 hospitals again, one for 3 or 4 weeks and then another one for 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know how long we're going to do it because the lecture class is only 6 weeks, so I don't know how much time is going to be left at the end of the semester. I don't know, but I do know that we're going to 2 different hospitals like the fall semester. But instead of doing like regular floor care like we did the first time, we're doing critical care where we're going to work in the ICU, and then we're also going to do neonatal pediatric care where we're going to work at a hospital with a NICU and a PICU. And then after that, I believe we have the entire month of May off to kind of give us a break. And then after that, our summer semester starts, our final semester. So for that semester, we're taking only 2 classes. We're taking cardiopulmonary rehab, which is, this says it's to teach us how to take care of like at-home patients with chronic pulmonary diseases. And then we're taking advanced practitioners review, and that class is pretty much just an entire NBRC board exam study class. Like that's all we're gonna do. We're gonna take practice TMC questions. I believe we're gonna do practice CSE things like for simulations. We're just gonna spend that entire 8 weeks just practicing for the board exam, and you know, they're gonna get us where we need to be. I also think that we're going to get like a bit of a review for pharmacology, which is fantastic because I definitely need that. I heard that there's a lot of pharmacology questions on the board exam, so I'm definitely gonna need that review. And then also, instead of taking those classes and then waiting until those classes are over to start clinical rotations, we're gonna do clinical rotations pretty much from the get. Like as soon as we start the semester, we're gonna find out where we're gonna be going and then go. So we're gonna be doing clinicals that entire semester, which is 8 weeks long, if I'm not mistaken. And then after that is graduation. We graduate at the end of July. And then I'm gonna take a few weeks off and study for the TMC and study for the CSE and get credentialed and go to work. Like making this video was trippy to me because it's crazy where I started versus where I'm at. And I'm actually really happy that I did this because I've pushed through a lot of stuff. And I'm very proud of myself. I've looked forward to this for years and I'm almost there. It's crazy. Don't let your age discourage you. I just turned 27. I started late. I changed my major. I had a baby. I took a year off. Things happen. So don't let your age or how long it's going to take deter you from, not necessarily if you want to do RT, like if you want to do something else like sonography or radiology or nursing, you know, don't let something silly like your age or just the timeline, you know, affect you doing that. Like if you can, if you want to, do it. So I plan on doing a Q&A in the future. So if you have any questions for me, go ahead and ask them down below, or you can DM me on Instagram, and as soon as I get, you know, a few questions that I can answer, that's when I'll film and post the video. But you can ask me questions about anything, about school, about motherhood, personal questions. Like ask any question you want, as personal as it is, within reason. I'll answer it. So that's it. That's everything. This video is kind of a long one, but I hope that, you know, I was at least some help to you. I hope that it was kind of encouraging, saying that, you know, you don't always have to have the best grades or a 4.0 GPA, because I definitely don't have a 4.0 GPA. I'm definitely, you know, plain Jane whenever it comes to like school. I'm very average. I'm not an overachiever. I'm not an underachiever. You know, you don't have to be the sharpest crayon in the box to get accepted to a program like this. But definitely, if you have any questions, please DM me on Instagram or post them down below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do so, and turn on the notification bell so that you know anytime I upload a video. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.